Hello everyone, welcome back to part 13 of how to use the classic FPS pack. In today's video we're going to be discussing the game flow, so this is how you can go from the menu to the end screen. We will also be discussing how to handle the player's death and how to move between different scenes. First, let's take a look at the given menu scene in the sample scenes folder. To find the scripts within the scene, go into the canvas and find the save UI component. This component is in charge of creating a new game, loading an existing game, and clearing all the saves in an existing save. They've already been hooked up to these buttons on the menu UI, and you can replicate this when creating your own menu. Let's go ahead and play the menu scene. When I click new game, it will take me to the starting scene. Then I can go to these yellow pads and it will take me to the next scene. When I go to the yellow pad on the final scene, it will take me to the end UI. And when I restart the menu scene, you'll see that the button has changed back to a new game. However, if I start playing the game at the final scene and don't go to the end UI and then restart the menu UI, you'll see that the button is load game. If I press load game, it will take me to the scene that I left off in. Or in other words, the scene that I made my last save in. To determine the starting scene, go into the game manager script in the prefab and change the starting scene name. The starting scene will be called through the menu UI when there are no existing saves. You can change the code and functionality for this in the menu UI scripts. In order for scene switching to work anywhere in the game, make sure that the scenes that you're using have been added to the build settings. An included prefab in this pack is called the level switcher prefab. This prefab allows you to step on it and it will take you to the scene that you've specified. In the component there are three main options: the scene to switch to, which is the name of the scene, the requires loading checkbox, and the reset all checkbox. The reset all checkbox will remove all the saves in the game so you can have a clean start. I've mainly used this for testing purposes. The requires loading checkbox will tell the game manager whether the next scene is a playable scene or not. If it is, then you should set this to true, because we want to save the player's position and state when we load into that scene. If we open up the level switcher script, you'll see that it's very simple, and you can reuse this in any way you see fit to switch between scenes. In order to switch between a scene in this pack, you should use the game manager by calling gamemanager.loadScene and giving the name of the scene and whether or not it requires loading. Remember, if you give requires loading to true, it will save that scene in this state. That means in the menu UI you can actually hit load game and it will take you to that scene you've last saved in. You'll see here as well, as part of the level switching, we're actually removing all the saves as part of this current scene. This is useful to save space as well as remove any redundant saves. If we head over to the final level and look at the level switcher component, you'll see that requires loading is actually set to false. This is because the end UI doesn't require any player or user input, and we don't want to save the states on that scene. Finally, if we go to the finish scene and look at the end UI script on the canvas, you'll see that all we're doing here is clearing all the saves. So once the user finishes the game, you clear all their saves and then they can restart if they want. The script responsible for saving the last scene you were on is the game state script on the game manager prefab. If you load the scene and it detects that you're not in the correct scene, it will transport you to that scene. Let's quickly take a look at the clear progress button on the menu UI. Go to the persistent data path on your operating system. In Windows it's app data, and then hit clear progress and you'll see that the files will disappear. The final thing to consider is how the player's death is handled within the game. The code related to this is in the player stats script on the player controller. If we look into this, you can see how the player is taking damage, and you'll see that if the damage is lower than 0, then we go to the death function. I strongly urge you to change this death function to suit your needs, because what it does currently is on player death, it resets the player back to the last found save. But on some cases you might want to take the player to the death screen, or handle it in some other way. Remember, all these scripts are just a template for you to change. That's why they've been made so simple to change and modify. If we take a look at the respawn from last save function, we can figure out exactly what it's doing. First, it's telling the scene manager to load the current scene again, so it restarts the scene. And we're setting the requires loading and await scene load to true. This is telling the game manager that the next scene to be loaded, we want to load all the saves from that scene. So we're just restarting the same scene and calling the saves of the scene. Hence, the player will be set back to the last save. I would say that the most important function in the game manager is the scene manager _ scene loaded function. This function is called every time a new scene is loaded. Here you can see if awaiting scene load and requires loading is true, we execute all this code. This code is responsible for spawning in the player controller and loading the scene's saves. That's all for this video, but if you want more information, you can check out the other tutorials on this channel, or you can check out some of the sample projects. If you want to see this asset pack in action, you can check out some of Thomas Brush's live streams where he's using this pack to build his new game, Father.